Elizabeth Chappell, a lifelong entrepreneur who finally found my niche. After years of new ideas and jumping from business to business, I figured out how to turn a craft into a successful career. In 2016, I started a monthly subscription box for quilters. That little startup has grown into a thriving, multiple six-figure business that I am so proud of. As a published author, designer of fabrics and patterns being sold throughout the world, my favorite thing to do is to teach others how to grow a career of their dreams. Each week, you'll hear from me or from other guests who are creative entrepreneurs, so you can learn exactly what to do and what not to do to grow a career that's more rewarding and successful than you ever thought possible. If you're ready to turn your craft into a career that you love, I am so excited you're here. Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast. Welcome to this week's podcast episode. This week, Brandy Maslowski and myself, we have swapped. She is going to be a guest on the Craft to Career podcast, and I am going to be a guest on her podcast, Quilter on Fire. Brandy has such a cool story and experience with, turning from firefighter to quilting educator, podcast host. She is a wealth of knowledge and experience as a quilter. So I cannot wait for you to meet Brandy and to hear and learn from her. And if you have not checked out her podcast, Quilter on Fire, make sure to hop on over and listen to that. You are going to love that podcast. If you have not left a review for the Craft to Career podcast, please take just a second. I don't run ads. The only ask that I have from the podcast is that you take just a moment to leave a review for the podcast. It can make a world of difference to someone else. It would mean so much to me. And more importantly, it could be a world of difference to someone else who could find the podcast. Now let's jump in and let me introduce you to Brandy of Quilter on Fire. Well, Brandy, I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks for being on the Craft to Career podcast. In a nutshell, we'll dive into more, but in a nutshell, can you introduce who you are in the quilting community?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for having me. And I'm so excited to be interviewing you as well in this podcast swap today. So sharing what my craft turned career is, well, it's quilting, of course. So my business is called the Quilter on Fire. And that's because I made a transition from firefighter to quilter. So my business is all about education, community, and travel. So when we look at the educational aspect, I'm a teacher, speaker, and judge. And also I'm a magazine editor for Quilting Arts magazine. And my community is the podcast. This is all about surrounding myself with people who lift me up and sharing the stories of wonderful makers in our community. And then the third part of my business is my travel. I travel all over the world to quilt shows. I host and lead land tours to wonderful quilt shows and destinations. And I love to be a special guest speaker teacher at retreats as well. So that's kind of my business in a nutshell.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot. So you are no longer a firefighter. Is that right?
That's right. I haven't been doing any work in the fire industry for about 2 years now. So I've been doing both businesses for well over a decade, but this is the first time in these last 2 years that I'm really putting in the effort to try to make this my full-time career.
My goodness. Okay. How are you doing this all? This is so much. Like you're doing tours, which I'm super intrigued about, all over, North America and the world. A teacher, a judge, which I'm also like half intimidated by. I'm like, don't look at my stuff too closely. How do you have time for all this?
That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges in business because as an entrepreneur, I kind of have that brain. This might be common for other people. I have that brain that loves to brainstorm. I will run around and oh, squirrel, oh, butterfly, and I'll find all these different ideas. And, really what I'm doing is I'm throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And if I fall in love with something, I will just go there in a really deep way. And if it works out, I'll keep doing it. And if it doesn't, I won't. So, what you mentioned about how do you do it all, really time management is the key. And I struggle with it like anyone else. Like every day I'm forgiving myself and I'm putting my head down and doing the work again. So it's a challenge, but I'm having so much fun.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask about being an editor? What does that look
Yes.
like? Tell me about, yeah, what do you do, the magazine, all things.
Well, I'm so thrilled to be involved with Quilting Arts Magazine. This is a brand new adventure for me. I'm a contract, so I'm the consulting editor for Quilting Arts. And so what that means is I'm kind of like the connector. I search out the people who contribute to the magazine. I invite them. We talk about themes and topics. I guide the theme of the magazine. I'm that person who puts the editor's note in the beginning. I have an incredible team of people who we work together to build this magazine. And I'm so proud to be involved in it because this has been my favorite magazine for decades. I've literally got hundreds of issues on my shelves, and just to be invited to be involved has been a dream come true. So I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Wow. So how did that position come about for you?
Well, I have been kind of an editor for a decade for blogs, magazines. I'm kind of a ghost editor. I do a lot of work behind the scenes, and I've always loved to write. And I have an English degree, and I've always felt like, what am I going to do with this big university degree? I became a firefighter right away, and I never really used it. So I've always written for business and quilting magazines all along the way. And it didn't really pay that well to work for these magazines. You got a few $100s here and there. So I started diving into the quilting industry some more, and I just always have kept writing. So it really was a good fit for me in the end.
Very cool. Well, I actually also have an English degree, and that's funny. I wonder how many of us entrepreneurs out there studied something totally
Yeah.
different. So I'm hearing, tell me if I'm hearing this correctly. You wanted to take quilting and turn it into a career. And you were like, well, writing these little things here and there, it's not paying very well. What could I do that pays better? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and firefighting, what was part of the decision to like, let's put that on the shelf and see if this quilting, can bring in some money.
I had a firefighter career for 15 years in central Canada in Winnipeg where I lived. And it was absolutely killing me. It was a tough career. I thought that I would just slide right in and fit in no problem as a female in that industry or in that workplace. And it just like absolutely not. I was young and naive, and I endured that for 15 years. And those are some of the best years of my life. Like, don't get me wrong, but I learned so much, and I was in the trenches for 5 years on the fire trucks. And then I moved into public education, which I absolutely loved. That was in that industry. That was my jam, teaching people how to keep themselves safe and prevent the tragedies. But after 15 years, my body was devastated. My spirit was crushed, and it was just day after day, it was just killing me. And so we realized that, something has to change. And this is where the transition came from that career. We decided, this is a good time. If I'm leaving that career, let's move to live where we want to live in Canada. We moved all the way across Canada to the West Coast, where the climate is temperate and the outdoor adventure, it's everything we want to do. So we took on this big move. And that's when I really thought, I'm going to try to make quilting happen for me. And I mean, it took another decade after that. I still worked in the fire industry in all types of different capacities, which some were great, some were not, but I had another 10-year career after that. And then just a couple years ago, finally, I was able to say, you know what, I can hang up my fire hat and do this full time, because over the pandemic, my business really blossomed.
Okay. Well, couple of questions. First of all, do you do retreats around where you live? It sounds beautiful. And if so, how does one attend?
I have done 2 retreats here locally at home. But right now, I really love to be invited to retreats and be the special guest. Like, you can imagine how much planning goes into a retreat. It is so fun. And I fall in love with these people, and we're friends for life. But when it comes down to it, as a creator who has a big business that I'm trying to figure out and run, it's so much easier to be invited as a special guest, come in, be paid for what I do, and then go home. So I'm kind of focusing on retreats where the invitation is out for me.
Okay, I get that. I'm hosting a retreat in Sundance this September, and I'm like, I can hear the appeal as you're speaking. I'm like, oh yeah, I would way rather just be the guest that shows up than like post it. So I
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that.
Those were some of the best times of my life, those two retreats that I did. But I mean, I'm sneaking around trying to get permission to put things on quilters' pillows while they're quilting.
Right.
I could be
Yep.
I could be in there enjoying their company and spending time with them and really just, giving them all the tidbits that I can share as much as possible. So that's a bit more fun for me than all that planning work.
Yeah. And when you go to retreats, what is it that you're teaching or presenting on?
Well, that's a really great question because a lot of people who listen to my podcast, they sort of assume that I am a quilter, a traditional quilter or a modern quilter. But what I really love to do is take quilters into artfulness. So that is my niche. I'm an art quilter through and through. And so I love to get quilters to do a little screen printing on fabric and then make a table runner or do something really artful with waves of fabric and stitch and use every stitch on your machine and add embellishments and things like that. So I'm all about taking quilters into artfulness.
Okay, that's really awesome. I would love to try that. And I'm super intrigued, and I know my listeners will be as well. How did you get to the point where you were like, I can hang up my firefighter's hat? I'm earning enough money here. What was it during the pandemic? I mean, what was it? How are you earning money as a quilter? Because so many people would love to make this their full-time career. So how are you accomplishing that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I have really grown my business over time. But when the pandemic hit, I had a podcast, stopped the podcast, done more firework. I was trying to balance everything to try to make an income and still do my passion on the side. And then when the pandemic hit, I had already gone from patterns to teaching to speaking. I had written my children's picture book, Christie's Quilt, but I wanted to establish myself as an expert in the field. So I had already embarked on this 10-year journey to become a quilt judge, and it was amazing. I had big fails and big wins, and I learned more than I could have ever imagined. Judging is one of my favorite things that I do in my business to this day. But what really grew my business over the pandemic was launching my Zoom offerings, basically. So I got connected with Global Quilt Connection, which was a great avenue for teachers to get, what they teach out to quilting guilds. So that really helped me right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think I was one of the very first people to jump on that bandwagon of let's get my stuff up on Zoom so I'm available. And I'm like, everything was suddenly canceled. We all know that if you had teaching and speaking and judging gigs all over North America and suddenly your whole year is just canceled, I had to go onto Zoom. So I tried to fill as many of those empty spots as possible for the guilds I had already booked. I said, come on, I'll get you guys on Zoom. I'll get your whole guild going. And I actually offered how to Zoom right at the beginning. And that was really helpful too. So a lot of guilds, I would have a 15-minute meeting with their guild executive and say, this is how it's going to go. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to send out. And I really helped them ease their guilds into it. And then sometimes people still come back and thank me for that because they've been Zooming ever since. And even though we're back to in-person long ago, some of them are still bringing in speakers on Zoom. So my lectures by far were my bread and butter over the pandemic. I literally did hundreds of lectures for guilds all over North America and the world. And that was really the way that I created an income over the pandemic. It's been wonderful.
Have you gotten any negative kickback for your success or monetization in the quilting community?
Yeah, that is such a good question. It's so important to put this question out there because anytime we have that little moment of success, there's going to be those people out there who are either jealous or envious or they try to bring you down. So I get everything in my business is about more joy and less overwhelm. And the podcast is all about the story. And there's literally nothing you could actually critique about a lot of that stuff. But one time I did my lecture. Now my lecture is very different than the average trunk show. I love listening to quilters' stories and seeing the quilts they've made over time. But my lecture is different. My lecture is called Your Mind Matters. And there's 5 life lessons in my lecture. And I created it at a girls' retreat with my best friend who's a counselor. She helped me create these 5 lessons. And so I still show 30 quilts, and art pieces of art, but my best friend helped me infuse these lessons. So once, like I've done hundreds of lectures over the pandemic, right? And all 100% good feedback. Well, one time this gal was about to book me, and we had the contract almost ready, and she was going to book me for a future gig. And she kind of snuck into another guild's lecture and secretly watched my lecture. And I didn't know, like anybody can, who knows who's watching you on Zoom, right? Well, she came back with such harsh criticism after my lecture. Her view was, this is like some psychology lecture. Like literally there's 5, like one of the life lessons is surround yourself with people who lift you up. Like how soft and fluffy is that, right? It's just a really joyful thing. So anyway, her feedback was, if I brought this lecture to my guild, they would crucify me. And I thought, oh my gosh, like what am I doing wrong? Like, so you think about the hundreds of wonderful things people say about like with feedback, and then you get this one thing. And then what do you focus on, right? You focus on the negative. It ruined my whole day. And I was on a holiday with my husband in Vegas in a car with the top down driving through the Red Rocks. And I'm looking at this phone, and my husband is like, put that away. You can answer her another day. That is just something hit her nerve, and she's taken it out on you, and that is not a kind person, right? So, those things happen, and you just have to let it. I really actually dealt with that in a positive, kind way. It took me a while to figure out how am I even going to respond to that. But I thought, I'm going to kill her with kindness. I'm going to say, what really was the problem? Like, what was really the hard part for you? And she was like, it's kind of like a psychology lecture, and you hardly had any quilts. And I thought, what? I had like at least 24 quilts in that lecture. Now I have over 30. And so I actually did take her quilt thing and I added a few more quilts just to beef it up a little bit. But, I think dealing with people with kindness is the best way to sort of, respond to that kind of negativity, because you have no idea what's happening in their life. I have no idea why I hit such a nerve. And unfortunately, she canceled the gig that we were going to do. But you know what? If she's not my kind of people, she's not my kind of people. So that's okay. Maybe one day when she's not on the executive anymore, that guild will reach out and hire me. So I think it turned out as well as it could have.
Yeah. Well, and I just feel like the more we put ourselves out there, the more visible you are, the more people obviously are going to see you, and everyone has their own opinions and cup of tea. But it sounds like things that worked really well for you. You have a partner who is in your corner. It was so great that he's like, put your phone away. Let's be present. Yeah. That's huge. I mean, having someone who can help ground you. And it's nice. I mean, for me, but also for my listeners to know it happens to everyone. There's just the more success you have, there's ups and there's downs. So thank you for sharing that. And on this topic, I've heard a conversation lately where people are like, I wish people wouldn't monetize quilting as much. Clearly, I'm talking to a quilterpreneur who's earning money, but what are your thoughts on this? And this is obviously, one-sided. I would love to hear other sides, but what would you say are the pros and cons of monetizing quilting, as far as for the individual and for the industry at large?
Yeah, there's so many things going on in the quilting industry. And, if you look at it on the whole, it's kind of a sad thing that, we're not making as much money as someone in another industry. But I just really find that, like, I'll give you an example, affiliate. Okay. So affiliate is this word that so many quiltpreneurs are like, don't worry, I'm just talking about this because I love it. I'm not an affiliate. Well, I mean, my opinion is, why would you send your entire community to a big corporate company to buy something and they get all the benefit when you've bought it or you have been given it and you love it and you use it and you're sharing it because you honestly love to use the product? I've broken 7 different mini irons and I love the Oliso iron. So if I'm going to talk about the Oliso iron on my videos, why not make 10 cents? You know what I mean? Like affiliate marketing is just it's such a small thing, right? Like you're not making huge amounts of money, but why not let the creator benefit in some way? And the truth about affiliate marketing is when the consumer is buying something, they're literally not paying more so the creator can get more. It's at no cost to the consumer, the affiliate marketing. So affiliate marketing, I think, is a wonderful way, to help boost your income. So there's so many different things out there. Like everyone's saying, oh, you should give your patterns away for free. You love what you're doing, so you should give it all away for free. Well, I don't agree with that. We've put a lot of hard work into what we do. We build those patterns, we create those events, we create those products. We should be able to put our product out there and sell it and make an income. And like sometimes I'll do a little launch. I do these tiny little launches. I only have one on-demand course. It's my first one. I've only had it up for a few months. And the first time I sent a series of 12 emails about it, I got 4 or 5 out of thousands of people on my email list. I got 4 or 5 people come back like, enough with the emails already. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Did you miss that little thing at the bottom where you can unsubscribe? Because if you're not my people, you're not my people. And also you can unsubscribe just from the marketing and you can still get all that good podcast quilty goodness. So I really think that we should all be here to lift each other up. It's so important. Like just my podcast is all about sharing the stories of creators, right? One more thing I'll say about this topic is that one time I got an email from someone and they didn't think they were sending it to me. I'm sure of it. They sent me an email as if they were sending it to a friend. And it said, oh, this is Brandy. Her podcast is all about commercializing her guests. But by the way, she has this person on, so you might want to listen. And I was like, what?
Whoops.
Who is this for, first of all? And this is not for me. I didn't even end up responding to her because I thought, oh, she'll be mortified if she realizes she sent it directly to me. But what I responded to that in my head, how I responded to that in my head was, she's absolutely right. I am commercializing my guests because I want my guests who are all makers in this industry to come on the podcast. I want to lift them up. I want to share their stories. And if they have something to offer to the world, I want them to be paid for it because they worked hard on it and they deserve it. So if that's commercializing my guests, then I'm okay with that.
I couldn't agree more. I was chatting with a friend who she was like, wouldn't it be amazing if, in elementary school or even in college, people are like, what do you want to do for a career? And they're like, I'd like to be a doctor or a lawyer or a quilter. And all of them are like, wow, respected. You can earn a really great income with that. And why, there's this shame about earning an income with this hobby. Well, the money's out there. It's $1 billion industry. Who do we want the money to go to? These big nameless corporations or to the artists who are in the thick of it and passionate about it? And I could go on and on, but I just feel, but it's intriguing for me to hear the other side of things as well and to kind of understand where they're coming from. But I don't want to demonize money or success or people who want to make a career out of this because we all need to make a living. And if this is how a person wants to, I think it's wonderful. And I don't know, I sometimes have had heard things like, oh, she's just trying to grow her audience. She's just trying to sell something. I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm really proud of this thing. I love it. And I'd love more people to have it,
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, we're going to do all kinds of fun things on Instagram and Facebook, and we're going to post all these crazy little trends and have fun with it. And we're going to look at someone else's niche and think, oh, that would be perfect in my niche. I'm going to try that with this video. And we're going to unroll the quilts. We're going to do all the fun things. And if someone's going to come back in the comments and say something nasty or rude or whatever, that's okay. We have to kill them with kindness because there's no way we could possibly know what is it in their day that's bringing them down so badly that they're going to have to say something so negative to me. Like if they're taking the time to write a negative comment, something must be really wrong in their life. And that's really kind of sad, right? So let's just kill them. I would love to see every time there's a nasty Nelly on there on social media. I really enjoy seeing all the other people come on, showering with comments that are really positive. That's a really fun thing for me to see on socials. So don't be afraid to speak up in a positive way if you see someone who's being a bit of a bully out there.
That's true. That is true. Because I've seen as well. I mean, Now, granted, whenever people hear this, it might be down the road, but currently in current, whatever, pop culture, Kate Middleton had that whole photo that was photoshopped. And there was all this like, where is she? She's disappeared, and just some nasty stuff. And then it came
Yeah.
out that she had cancer. And now all of a sudden everyone's really sweet and kind. And just being a fly on the wall and watching the conversation happen and seeing people be kind and approach with kindness. I'm like, oh, it makes a big difference. It changes how I feel. When I watched all the controversy and the meanness, I'm like, yeah, what's going on? So the comments that we make, we can be a voice for good. We can help people have a little more compassion and kindness about things.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you take a look back at, like what's been a pivotal thing that I've done in my business, like I know this is one of the questions we were talking about earlier. It's all about a rising tide lifts all boats, right? If we can support each other, every individual person is trying to convince themselves, I can do this. I know I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to do the work. But it takes a whole village of people on social media in your community. That's why I created the podcast, to create a community around myself that lifts me up. It was actually a focus on self-care to create the podcast. And I get all this feedback about, oh, it was so great to listen on my walk in the wilderness. It was so great to listen on my drive every day. I surrounded myself with a community, and in return, I got a community that gives me back joy. So even though it was kind of a focus on self-care, I think I'm really doing something to lift other people up as well.
Which is the most beautiful, it just brings me so much joy, where you're giving and receiving, and that's the kind of thing that lights me out. That's the kind of business we all want to have, not just business, but all the things. So I'm curious if you were to share some advice for my listeners who are thinking of teaching either in person or virtually, what advice would you share with them?
Well, first, we all get stuck in this spiral of researching and finding a new course and a new this and a new that, and going into the spiral of there's 10 different platforms we could use and all that kind of stuff. I would say use that KISS principle. Keep it simple, right? Mm-hmm. We all get stuck in that spiral. But one thing that really worked for me was getting involved with that global quilt connection. So that was a great avenue to get my teaching offerings out to the quilting guilds. But she also teaches, Lyric Kennard runs that, and she also teaches how to become an online educator. What I would say, if you're doing it for the first time, beyond just keep it simple, I would say find something that you absolutely love. It doesn't have to be a niche. It just has to be something that you really, really love. Then get educated on it. Find the best mentor you can find and take their courses and do the thing and put your head down and do the work so that you become good at it. And once you've gone through the mentoring process, put in all those hours so that you become the expert in your industry, in that niche or in that thing that you really love the most. If you're doing what you absolutely love, the spiral is going to go by the wayside. You're not going to get lost in all the different things that you can do, all the little squirrels you can follow. You're going to put your head down, do what you love, and people will gravitate to you because you're just loving what you do.
Ooh, I really feel that and love that. The whole get educated, become an expert on the thing, be qualified to really speak on that. So I love that. Thank you. So just to wrap things up, if our listeners want to find you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the Quilter on Fire everywhere. You can find me on the socials. I'm new to YouTube. You can find me on YouTube. And of course, you can find the podcast. If you're listening to this, you know how to listen to a podcast. But the Quilter on Fire podcast is all about lifting others, sharing their stories, and bringing you a little bit of joy in your ear while you quilt. So I started the podcast in December 2020. I've done over 150 episodes with amazing guests, from Kay Fassett to Alex Anderson to Jenny Doan to Tula Pink. But also the most delightful stories have been some of the unknown guests like Kathy and Bonnie. These are sisters. I call them the Scrap Sisters. And we did this amazing episode that turned into a scrap challenge that turned into money in a charity's pocket. So that was super fun. And then another guest like Wendy Zavara, she was a military mom with several jobs, several kids. She made a coat of many colors for her 3-year-old for Christmas because her daughter was in love with Dolly Parton and couldn't get enough of that movie. So there's so many wonderful episodes. I've had over 500,000 listens, recently broke that milestone. So be sure to go on over and check it out.
Okay. And I'm curious how do you find these speakers, like the coat of many colors? How do you find these different guests?
Wendy Zavara, I literally spotted her daughter in that coat on Instagram and I messaged her instantly. I was like, I need to have you on the podcast. This is the most heartwarming story I could ever imagine. Will you please be my guest? And at first she was like, no, but I convinced her. I said, please, this is just such a lovely story and I would just love to share it with everyone. And she agreed and we had so much fun.
That is so cool. Well, thank you so much. And then last question before wrapping up, can you just share the biggest highlight of your creative career? And then let's do the struggle first. We'll end with the happy thing. So what's been something that you struggled with your career? And then what's been the greatest joy and highlight?
Yeah, I think the biggest struggle is, the odd negative Nelly who really tries to bring you down. I don't know why it is, but when there's that negative little thing, you really focus on that the most and you forget all those hundreds of comments that were lovely. So that's been my biggest struggle. I actually had someone say to me early on in my quilt judging learning journey, I had someone say to me, who do you think you are trying to become a quilt judge when you don't even enter quilt shows? Like I'm an art quilter. So my art quilts generally go into galleries or traveling shows, or I sell them on my website. But it really, that brought me down for so long. So those kind of things have been the big struggle. But I use positive affirmations and self-care and things like that to just lift me up and put those things behind me. The biggest win, I have to say that it's the podcast. I mean, I haven't done anything else in my business that has brought me so much joy, surrounded me with so many amazing people, and opened up the channels of communication in the quilting world. I literally have people coming to me now to be on the podcast, which is a huge shift. When you sort of hit that tipping point where people are coming to you, you can say, yeah, I have advertising spots. You can do things like that, and it really changes your whole world. So the podcast really has been a huge accomplishment and highlight for me in my quilting career.
Very cool. And I said it was the last question, but another one just popped up. So I'm going to go with it. How did you decide to do a podcast? I mean, I'm sure you didn't know at the time this would be your biggest highlight, but what made you think, I'm going to start a podcast?
Well, I started podcasting way back in 2013. It was called Canadian Quilt Talk, and it's not even available on the airwaves anymore. But I really felt a little out of place as an art quilter. So I just thought, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to talk about all things art quilting, all things quilting, and I'm going to do these cool topics. I'm going to talk about ergonomics and self-care and all these different things. I kind of changed my blog into a podcast to try to stay with the times, basically. And what ended up happening was I surrounded myself with an amazing community. Then I got back into the fire industry for many years and I stopped the podcast. But when the pandemic hit, I really sat down and I thought, how can I make a living doing this quilting at home? This fire job is killing me. I need to figure out how I can do this for a living. And I thought, what do I really miss the most? It's the community. It's the podcast. So I rebranded, started it all up again in December 2020, and I haven't looked back.
Very cool. I love that. Well, I feel like you're a kindred spirit. This has been one of the fun parts for me with the podcast, is really getting to know people like yourself and just connecting and feeling like, wow, we have a kindred spirit, a friend in this community. So thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, it has been an absolute pleasure, Elizabeth. This has been so much fun. Thank you for giving me the chance to share some of the best bits of my story.
Brandy, thank you so much for being a guest here on the Craft Your Career podcast. I truly and sincerely love meeting other quilters. This is probably my favorite thing about hosting a podcast, and I hope that you listeners love it just as much as I do. So Brandy, thank you so much again for being here. And if you've not checked out her podcast, go on over and take a look at Quilter on Fire. And I will see you back here next Friday. Take care and have a wonderful week.